I'm really, really happy to discuss contract templates today, split contracts, and decentralized arbitration. So we have a lot on our plate, and this will more be a conversation opener rather than a closer. But for context in the chapter, and I'm going to share it again here in the chat notes, we are in Open Society Layer 4, where we focus on smart contracts and other contractual innovations. And we open the chapter with kind of saying that when we talk about smart contracts, it often sounds like we really want to automate everything all at once. And it's really hard to see how to get there from here. And maybe that's not even desirable, right? And so that's why in the chapter, we start with this kind of analogy, really to templates and to this analogy to back in the days that when making good, when you wanted to make really, really good looking flyers, it kind of required you to go into a print shop. But then gradually the Macintosh came along and inkjet printers. And so suddenly everyone was kind of able to make really good looking, attractive designs at home. But even though the technologies were available, that didn't really mean that the skills were. And so at the beginning, you had a lot of really horrible looking newsletters that use Comic Sans for everything, right? But then over time, a whole industry grew, the demand grew to create the skills. And then many more people created templates to guide people away from using Comic Sans for everything. And so similar, perhaps, you could imagine with smart contracts, once the technology is here, the first few iterations of contracts may be rather terrible, but then over time, as we make it easier for people to play test them and templatize those that work, we may actually create better and better smart contracts. But even if we do, that's not actually all we want, right? But because there may still sometimes be a few cases where we actually want a human in the loop, because paper contracts or smart contracts risk locking in the present in a way where we don't really know what the future participants will consider relevant. And so sometimes we don't really want the credible arrangement to be one that is the contract, but instead we wanted to take account what factors that require human judgment. And so one such example is the split contract with a mix of software and prose. And so we're super, super happy to have Chip Morningstar here today. And Chip actually pioneered the thing that we call split contracts with the American Information Exchange in the 1980s. And it prototyped a lot of really desirable features that I think one may want from contracts, including the thought of templating, including the idea of having an automated and a prose part, including the thought of a human in the loop as arbitrator. And so knowing, I think, that dispute is possible but costly, and that an outcome is uncertain, and also being able, going into a contractual arrangement, to really co-design the parts up front. And that, I think, makes really interesting game theoretic arrangements possible when designing different contracts. And so I'm super happy to have Chip here to talk about that today. And then once he's talked about this really early, amazing prototype, we'll take a jump into the future, that is the present, and we'll look at a few projects that already entail a few of those features. For example, Legalese, a company for computational law, and Cleros, which is a decentralized arbitration service, both of which are incorporating really crucial elements of this super early pioneer. So I'm really, really happy, Chip, to have you here. I think when researching parts of the book, there were very few early pioneering prototypes that didn't have your name on them, somewhere in them. So I'm really, really glad that you were able to join, and super excited for you to tell us a little bit about Amex and about really early contract experimentation in there. So thank you, it's much appreciated. And yes, the stage is yours. I'll make you co-host in case you have slides. No worries though.
Okay, so let's deal with the logistical parts first, just to make sure that the things are functioning. So do we have? Can you see a slide that says American Information Exchange?
No, I can see your browser, and it has a blip, like a, yeah.
Trains.
Good train.
That's very weird. Okay, so
you have to click, like, go on the slides that you want to present, click on them, and then immediately go on screen share, because it usually, I think, automatically per default goes to the last one that you had open.
All right, how about that? You see slides now? You see?
No.
No.
This is. I don't understand why this. Let's try again.
What slide presentation software are you using?
I'm trying to use Keynote. Okay, now do you see?
Ah,
Yes.
yes.
Lovely.
Yes.
All right. All right, now let's see what happens. Now do you see it full screen?
Yes.
Hey!
Yes.
Technology. So we've only been connecting slides to screens for like, what, 30 years. So eventually it'll work. So I'm going to talk about American Information Exchange. This is not going to be a complete dump of everything about American Information Exchange, if for no other reason than I did not have the time to go into all of the software archaeology that would be required to get things like screenshots and other things. So I'm just going to talk about a few particular bits of stuff. So just as a bit of background, Amex was back in the 1900s, in the days of stone knives and bearskins, before the World Wide Web, before the internet was ubiquitous. There were these things called online information services with systems like CompuServe and The Source and Genie and like those. Most of these were services that charged an hourly fee to let users share information with each other. And it was quite expensive by current standards. So like CompuServe was like $8 to $20 an hour, depending on what time of day you were using it. Or they were services that were companies providing information. They were charging for access to the information that they provided. And Amex was the brainchild of Phil Salin, who was an economist who dealt with the economics of information. And he had started getting interested in technology and had heard of that there were these online information services, and had developed a picture in his mind of what those things obviously must be, and then went and started playing around with these services and discovered that they were nothing like what he as an economist naturally expected them to be, but being of an entrepreneurial bent of mind, he said, aha, here is a business opportunity. And Amex's big idea was that was to actually have an exchange where people could buy and sell information products and online information services to and from each other. One of the great marketing challenges we had with Amex was trying to explain to our potential customers that actually they might potentially get paid to use this service instead of having to pay by the hour. And that was so weird and radical that people had a hard time grasping what that meant. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that I could go into, but we don't have time for that. So I'm just going to talk about a few key ideas. In the course of doing this, we learned a bunch of stuff, and I'm going to just hit three main points because they had come up previously in discussions in some of these meetings. And Allison said, "Hey, would you come talk about split contracts?" Which I'll talk about a bit. Split contracts or mixed contracts, this is not a term that we actually ever used. I think that just kind of emerged in conversation in this group. But the idea was that, let's say I'm going to hire you to do a marketing study for me, because of course you're a person who does that sort of thing, and we're going to interact with each other electronically. We observe that there's some of the stuff that can be done by machines, like actually conveying the work product from the producer to the consumer, dealing with payment. Some of this can be automated, so we can arrange to have the payment, automatically be transferred in exchange for the delivery of the goods. And some of the stuff can't be done by machines, like, for example, actually doing this marketing study. Some of the stuff can be monitored by machines. Anything having to do with acts of communication between the participants, just asking the question, was this delivered on time? And once again, some of that can't be monitored by machines, like was the marketing study that you did any good or not? Or was it in fact even a marketing study? And Amex was built around the idea that there were aspects of a contract which were amenable to automation, and we wanted to automate those. And there were aspects which are not amenable to automation, and those are just going to have to be done in prose in the old-fashioned way, but we could provide a structured context for that. And so we developed a system for doing what you call structured negotiation, where there's a series of communications back and forth between the participants, and by capturing metadata that was provided for doing this, we could track the stuff by, you can use automation to track the stuff that automation can take care of, things like payment terms and scheduling and the like. We could have lots of back and forth, and we can record the communications that were exchanged between the participants. And we had a model, sort of a state machine, which sort of modeled the state of the contract as its execution unfolded. So I can propose some terms. You can modify the terms. We can go back and forth adjusting the terms as we negotiate. Then when we agree, we can note the fact that both parties have agreed to the same things, that they have committed to particular dates, particular payments. So for example, just a question of payment for something like, let's say, a market research study, there might be some portion of the payment which is going to be upfront, and then maybe another portion which is upon delivery, and then finally another portion which is when the recipient approves this. And of course, because this is the real world, things can always go wrong. And so this sort of structured workflow has to have provision for dealing with exception conditions and what happens when things don't go as expected, because that's fairly common. If you look at what's actually in the bulk of the text of contracts that people do the traditional way, a huge fraction of it is about what you do when things go off the rail. And so the structured negotiation machinery has to include facilities for renegotiation. And then sort of in the worst case where you actually have a dispute where it's not come down to just the normal things like it took longer, or, well, that wasn't quite the thing I wanted. I really wanted, this, could you please do this little piece over again? And the sort of normal back and forth that you have when people are working together, but actually, actually a dispute where I think I delivered the thing that you wanted and you disagree. Well, we, at least at this point, we have a historic record. We have an audit trail that can be used, that can be packaged up and automatically conveyed to other people who are providing the service of being a dispute mediator or an arbitrator. And we can have agreed in advance to use this mechanism. And we can dramatically lower the cost of that mediation by the fact that a lot of the relevant evidence is captured automatically in a structured form that's just right there for the mediator or the arbitrator to examine. And the mediation service itself can be something which is dealt with through the medium of this sort of structured negotiation, smart contract, split contract mechanism, and thereby lowering the cost of dispute. And anytime you lower the cost of dispute, you lower the risk, and hopefully a world of wonderfulness and improvement emerges from that. And then the other thing which is worth mentioning here is that is that something which Amex spent a lot of its effort on. It was about providing context. In Amex was specifically about delivering goods and services which could be themselves delivered electronically. So information products, this could be a piece of software, it could be some advice, it could be the answer to a question, it could be, you know, a science fiction novel. But in all of these are things which are amenable to actual delivery through the network, as opposed to there's something that has to be physically packaged up and shipped to somebody. In the world of information, there's this issue that it's hard to kind of know what you're getting without actually getting it. And then once you've gotten it, you've got it. And so there's a much more of a need for someone to be able to get meta information and context to make judgments about something before they've actually gotten the thing that they might or might not be choosing to pay money to get. So you need to surround the information with information about the information. So all of the stuff that would be printed on the box if it were something sold in a store, but you know, if I'm going to buy a hammer or an automobile or some physical thing, you know, I can pick it up, I can hold it, I can test drive it, I can examine it in various different ways. But if it's a piece of information, I can't do that. But various descriptive information can be provided that will surround it. A lot of this had to do with reputation, both the reputation of the provider. You can ask, what else have they done? What are the other people they've done business with? Think of them. You know, are this person's other customers happy and satisfied? And then the reputation of the product itself. And you know, you see a lot of this now with things like reviews on Amazon. But this predated all of that. And you can do things like you can offer various kinds of warranties and guarantees, and these themselves can be part of the terms of the semi-automated contractual framework that's used to negotiate. So we can have an arrangement so that if you're not satisfied, you know, you get your money back, or some timeline for what your methods of recourse are if you would like some changes made or whatever. All of those can be built into the terms, and those kinds of guarantees and warranties are things that can be communicated in advance. And also, in some cases, it's useful just to be able to ask questions from the person that you're potentially going to do business with. You know, I think this thing that you're selling looks to me like it's a something or other. You know, and ask, well, does that, or does your piece of software have the following feature? Can I use it in the following ways to do whatever it is I'm thinking to do? But all of this sort of contextual surround becomes much more important when you're having to deal with everybody through a purely electronic medium, where a lot of the channels of recourse and a lot of the sort of pre-qualification techniques that you'd use in the physical world are not available to you. And so we built a lot of machinery to do that, and we learned a lot about that. So anyway, that's just a very sort of brief whirlwind summary of the things we dealt with in Amex. And I'd be happy to gab about this to the extent that anybody's interested.
Thank you so much. Fantastic. Chip, do you mind, because I have a slide here on how one of the early arrangements actually looked. Do you mind if I show it?
Oh, go for it.
Yeah, okay. Let me see if I can now share my screen appropriately. Okay, so this is...
Oh my gosh, you actually did some of these software archaeology.
Huh? Yeah, I did that. Yeah. So this is actually, you know, I think now we are so used to, you know, Reddit, and we're so used to, you know, Upwork and all of those things. But actually back in the days, you know, they really had like a request for information out there, and then someone could could propose that they would actually submit a document that would fulfill the specification of the request, and even how much would be paid on agreement of the contract, on delivery, and on acceptance. So it had a kind of three-part structure, which made it really nice because you could put different values in for each of those. So there were really interesting, I think, factors that were all amenable to people's discretion. Then this is a slide that I took on the split contract, or on the types of arbitration that were possible there. And then I think just for good measure, I also had another one on Habitat, which is also one of the main projects that you work on that many people here know. But that's just, I think, to give people, because I think we now take it for granted, right? That we have those kinds of systems like Reddit, like Upwork, and so forth, in which we can just ask a question and we get an answer delivered, right? And so, but back in the days, I think it was really, you had to sift through so many layers of information to get the info that you wanted, and it was a really, I think, revolutionary arrangement of kind of like, of portraying much of what we now take for granted in the information ecosystem that we're in the web. So I thought it was a really interesting use case. All right, so
the Habitat slide there didn't have anything to do with Amex, but it is another thing that I worked on, which was project I did at Lucasfilm, which was the first, basically the first MMO.
And now there's a new Habitat, I think, available too, which I encourage people to check out on Twitter. It has a really fantastic.
Right there, if you go to, I think it's neohabitat.org, we've actually reconstructed the original Habitat, which ran on a Commodore 64, which means you can run it in a Commodore 64 emulator in a web browser.
Yeah. And we have many folks here, I think, who are working, I think maybe even Esteban from Decentralized, who are working on really fantastic new virtual arrangements and new virtual worlds. And we'll hear about Decentralized, for example, I think in the next presentation. But I think it's always really interesting to go back into the early virtual communities and see, because I think you just threw everyone in there into the same virtual environment, and different arrangements existed. And many of the legal battles that we have now were kind of simulated in there. Okay, enough about this. Mark has the first comment, and then Jazir.
Yeah, so one of the things that I thought was really important about the Amex arrangement is the change in defaults, or to put it more pointedly, what happens under inaction. In real world contracts, if you're supposed to pay me and you just don't do anything, I don't get paid. So could you talk about how Amex completely changed around what happens under inaction?
Right. Well, in particular, you could have a situation where payment where you can do do automated payments. So say you have 30 days to approve or disapprove the delivery of the thing that I sent you, but the default is approve. And so basically you have 30 days to say no. And if you don't do anything, the payment happens automatically. That kind of thing is just as easy to do as the traditional, okay, I'm going to pay you now model. But it means that both the provider has less worry about am I going to get paid, because the question is now no longer do I have to worry about this person flaking out, or just not getting around to it. Having worked as a consultant for many years, you quickly learn that every large corporation's accounts payable department is incompetent, and so, the evolutionary pressure is in that direction. But it also means that you, as the customer, are now no longer you're no longer kind of feeling the deadline. It's not like, oh, I've got this thing and I should get around to it at some point. You can know that it'll just get taken care of automatically if you don't engage with it. That means that you have an incentive to actually go look, but it also means that if it slips your mind, you don't leave somebody who's dependent on you hanging.
Lovely. Jazir, next.
Hey, great presentation, Chip. My question for you, when I was looking at this, it occurred to me that there's a natural synergy here between mixed contracts and the idea of like higher order composability that Agoric is so famous for. I'm wondering if you thought about this idea that as these options move from place to place, like you renegotiate the contract a little bit, but that's all kind of done in an automated fashion.
Yeah, I mean the obviously we had only a limited opportunity for that, given the, I won't say given the technology of the day, but given the fact that it was technology that had to be developed, and there's more features you wanted to do than you had time to do them. But yeah, and in fact, the whole dispute mediation process itself is sort of an example of that, because it's using the negotiation and contracting framework kind of turned in on itself to provide services that have to do with what do you do when the negotiation and when the performance of a contract does not meet expectations. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and I think there will be. I think this is a space which is has not been well explored, mainly because there haven't been very many vehicles for the exploration to take place. I think there's a lot of room for experimentation, and having a framework like Agoric will we hope give us a platform for people to try lots of different things out and have a chance to see which kinds of things actually work and provide value.
Lovely. I see a nod there from Mark. Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of just asking to dig in deeper on that. Like, obviously, these contracts still had disputes sometimes. And of course, context helps a lot. But was Amex like running a big dispute arbitration system? And like, did you have like jurors, or like who was resolving disputes? What did that look like?
We had, it wasn't a very big, it wasn't very big in that respect, simply because there weren't very many disputes. Most things go through fine, and a lot of the kinds of things that can happen when stuff goes wrong was sort of already anticipated in the structured negotiation flow. So a lot of the sort of the commonplace things that can go wrong are just sort of part of the machinery. So for example, you want to ask for a refund. You can send the provider a message saying, hey, I didn't like this for the following reasons. I'd like my money back, or I'd like some of my money back. And by just clicking in a few places, the seller had the option to do that. And a lot of stuff got resolved in that way. But we actually engaged the services of, I forget what the name of the organization was. It was not the American Arbitration Association, which apparently only deals with like giganto deals where it's like you have to have like a minimum of $100,000 at dispute or something. And but there were organizations of people who professionally were mediators of disputes, and essentially they got what amounted to a workstation, which is just the usual Amex client, in which they could get pinged with a dispute, and they would at a few keystrokes they could review the history of all of the back and forth between the parties, read what was said, what was promised, what was examine what was delivered, and make some judgment, and do that fairly quickly and at low overhead. And we didn't have this happen very much, because for the most part, when you lower the frictions for all of this other stuff, you don't tend to get into these big fights in the first place. But it's often the case that the mere fact of having a pathway for recourse is one of the things that helps you avoid having to need a pathway for recourse. Kind of paradoxical, but true.
Yeah, and I'm super happy to have Federico here. I think who will tell us a little bit about Cleros. If only Cleros had existed back then already. Okay, we have Kate, I think, with another question on split contract.
Yeah, I'm curious what the legal world thought of Amex at the time. So my experience recently with smart contracts was that the legal world would say, all right, these things that are smart contracts, they don't look like the legal contracts that we're familiar with. Therefore, it's a complete misnomer, and the two things have nothing to do with each other. So I'm curious if there was any, if you got any feedback to that extent.
I'm not sure we even use the language of contract in the description of the consulting system. We talked about agreement, we talked about negotiation. Part of it was the way the system worked was sort of part of the deal, and there was a fairly carefully drafted customer agreement in which people agreed up front to participate in this process on these terms as part of signing up. And in fact, all of that paperwork, all of that is available online somewhere. I don't have it at the tips of my fingers, but somewhere here I've got, oh yeah, I've got the Amex. Wow, the clipping really does a number on it. The Amex manual, you know, this is back in the days when you had printed manuals, and about the back, you know, quarter of it is actually the customer agreement, and we had lawyers go over it very carefully, and it was written to be not so much legalese, but something that a normal person could read and understand.
I actually have it. Can I share it here as a doc?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, people are obviously welcome to read that and riff on it and take it as a jumping off point for their own work and thinking. The other thing was we did talk to a lot of lawyers about what this meant in terms of the future of law. For the most part, they were supportive and intrigued. And of course, there may be a selection effect of which lawyers we chose to talk to. I remember Mark in particular at one point was talking to members of his family, and the piece that I remember hearing somebody say, well, obviously, if you're going to be giving legal advice through Amex, you should be a member of a bar in whatever jurisdiction you're giving legal advice for. And if you're going to give medical advice over Amex, you had better not be a licensed doctor. Which I thought was pretty funny.
I want to just interject a brief historical note. I think that you're right that at the time Amex was not using the contract terminology. I coined the term split contract well after Amex was in operation in order to explain the relationship between what Amex was doing and Nick Szabo's notion of smart contracts. I was trying to explain how the ideas related to each other.
Yeah, and I think we were in fairly regular conversation with Nick during this whole time, and I'm sure that there was a lot of cross influence back and forth on his thinking from watching what we did and in the other direction as well.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I think in the interest of time, we'll move over to where or what are current prototypes thereof. And super happy to have two folks here. Once Meng Weng and then also Federico Ast. I also contacted Erasure Bay, which is currently a crypto project that is doing different types of crypto rewards, like bounty systems, by which you can burn people's stake. And I thought that was a really nice kind of insinuation of the three-part system by which you could have one reward by the completion of a document, one by the agreement of a contract, one by the completion of a document, and then one by the successful completion of a document. They couldn't be here today, but we have someone fantastic on both on the templating aspects of contracts and how to actually create super easy, smooth contracts, and then one on the arbitration system. And I'm super happy. Thanks, Mark, for pointing out Cleros to me, and thanks, Federico, for joining. We'll start with the templates first. So Meng, when you're ready to go, it would be lovely if you wanted to present for a few moments on Legalese. and I will share some more information about you here in the chat.
All right, just give me a moment to get my screen share going. How many geeks does it take to to get a Zoom working, right? Okay, just press this button and then press that button and then press this other button, and it should all come together. While I get this going, I want to say hi to some familiar faces. I haven't seen you in a while. Used to seeing this crowd at the Chaminade Resort in Santa Cruz. So hello to those of you who, okay, screen share. You're gonna get my entire 4K desktop. I hope that's okay.
We can handle it.
Okay, there it is, boom. You should see a big screen. All right, so I'm actually filling in for Alexis. I know she was listed as presenting, but she's busy right now, so I'm just going to give this talk. So she and I are the co-founders of a little startup called Legalese, and last year we picked up about 11 million in funding from the Singapore government to design and implement a language for laws and contracts based on open source and open standard principles. And we did get into this starting out with thinking about how to build templates, but we rapidly got to the point of saying, templates aren't really enough. We need to do an entire DSL language here. So we are only it's a 5-year program. We're only 1 year into it. So a lot of what we're doing is still under construction, but we do have a team of computer scientists and lawyers programming in languages like Haskell and Prolog, working on things like finite state machines and Petri nets. So it feels a little bit like the 1980s all over again. But hopefully this time it'll be the AI summer and not the AI winter. So wish us luck. And another thing that's different this time is that there's been a steady tradition of research over the last few decades that we think we can translate out of academia and onto the internet, which didn't exist back in the 1980s. And so we've been reading decades of papers at the intersection of computer science and law, and there are literally hundreds of academic papers and research efforts in this area. And out of all of this, we are trying to build a language that people can actually use. We are writing like plugins for VS Code, so we're serious about getting adoption. But we begin with the observation that legal text is the ultimate pseudocode. If you think about it, it's kind of a self-modifying specification language with arbitrary system calls to the real world. And the weird thing about this language is that it's interpreted not by machines, but by humans. And coming from a software background, all of this struck me as just absolutely perverse and also an opportunity. Because, as a programmer, I'm used to having all these tools available to help me do my job, right? And, this isn't even the stuff that is my actual job. This is all the infrastructure surrounding how I do my job. And sometimes they get in the way, but when they work, they are pretty powerful. And if you think about law, right, what does the legal stack look like? What do lawyers use, right? You've got Microsoft Word, and your most advanced technology is track changes, right? Like in terms of languages, you're still using Latin half the time. That is how slow things are. It's 2,000 years old. And so, we look at the legal tech challenge from this perspective, and we think that every gap in this chart is an opportunity. Stacks are built from the bottom up. So our approach is to build a language, some might call it a programming language, but it's really a specification language. And, it's closer to something like SQL, SQL, which is more a specification, a more declarative language than JavaScript, which is more procedural. And I'll just sort of talk through some of the intuitions, the motivations, the premise, because if I explain the problem well enough, I think you can probably figure out the solution for yourself. So where we started with about 5 years ago was the observation that contracts look like someone was trying to write a program, but they didn't know any programming languages, so they wrote their program in English. And so our solution to this was let's just give people the language, the formal languages that they need to do that right. And so, in terms of if you think about how you solve problems in the quantitative domain, right? If you have a problem involving numbers or amounts or dollars, you reach for a spreadsheet. I spent some time at at Harvard talking to Bob Frankston about this. But basically, spreadsheets are the solution for quantitative reasoning. But what is the equivalent to the spreadsheet for legal or logical or qualitative reasoning, right? I think the reason we don't have an answer to that question is the reason that we don't have something like a GitHub for contracts today. Because like if you go online, you search for things, you get a bunch of PDFs, but those PDFs are kind of like, they feel like binaries, right? They're like wares being distributed. And what you want is the source code to that binary, but the source code doesn't exist. It exists in like the head of a lawyer. And so if we can, take a proper computer science approach to this, we can have like expressive formalisms that you can then transform, transpile, compile, project to other representations, whether they are like visual, like graphs, diagrams. You can turn it into English or French or German or Spanish. You can compile it to a blockchain, or you can implement it as like a web app with a chat bot. You can push it into a model checker using Z3. So, we think of contracts as basically a problem in internet protocols, internet protocol infrastructure. And what that means is, if we had a sort of smart contract language that isn't completely obsessed with just blockchain, right? Like blockchain, yes, we do want to be able to compile to things like Solidity and other blockchain languages, but we also want to compile to English because, at the end of the day, judges, they're going to be reading English. And so we want to turn it into natural language. And that allows you to have user interfaces that are basically like web apps, expert systems. You can give them solvers, like you can say, here's my legal situation. How do I get from here to there? What operations do I need to perform? And so we are doing all of this work in sort of the open source, open standard tradition. As an old time hacker, I have worked on internet infrastructure before, and I think if we think of this problem as an internet infrastructure problem, we can solve it. So at Stanford, there is actually a class now in computational law, and their motto here is law without lawyers. And I guest lectured for them earlier this week, and I was asking the question, look, if you think about all these no code and low code platforms that are out there today, people are trying to make it possible for you to program without being a programmer. But we all know that if you succeed in that goal, the people who can program without being programmers just end up being programmers, right? And so if you end up being able to do law without lawyers, you're just going to end up being a lawyer. You have become the very thing you swore to destroy. So just like 1 minute demo of what we're actually doing. I'll show you the language, and I'll give an example of basically cabbage, okay, because of the joke, right? So let's pretend there's a simple law out there that says, okay, you can only sell cabbage on the day of a full moon unless you have an exemption from the Director of Agriculture, because people are obsessed with like, oh, how do you add human discretion to this? And so if you sell a cabbage, the buyer has the right within 3 weeks to return your cabbage for a 90% refund, which the seller must issue within 3 days. And so this is how we represent that in our language. And this is just a draft of the language. And you can see that it does have like serious influence from like SQL. It's got these uppercase keywords because we want to be very 1980s here. And this is an actual working program that has a parser, it has a compiler, you can take this thing and turn it into a bunch of other representations. And so it comes with a language specification. You've got the grammar here, you've got Alex and Happy and Lex and Yak. And once you've got that program, you can then turn it into something like Prolog, which, logic programming. And our claim is that every clause in every contract that exists today, every traditional English language contract, every clause basically follows this fundamental structure, which is that under certain conditions, some party meeting certain criteria, like me or you or whoever, either must, may, or shall not perform some action to some criteria before some deadline or after some deadline. And a contract is made up of a graph of these clauses. If they comply, then you go to X, and if they violate, then you go to Y. And you can represent this visually as a sort of happy path goes to the right. So you can say party A has to do something, and if they do, then party B has to do something, then party A has to do something else. And if they fail to do it, they take this brown left path of failure, but they can still get back on track if they take a reparation step. And so, these are some alternative representations that you can do. And so it's been fun trying to teach lawyers about like state transition networks and finite state automata and like graphes and dots. So that's kind of fun. So I'm not going to get into all the theory of this, but we just observe that contracts are basically specifications for multi-agent distributed systems, which is a fancy way of saying like protocols and APIs and things that programmers know how to do. So anyway, let's make the bold assumption that a decade from now, something like this language might be taught in law schools around the world. We've actually had law schools coming to us saying, how soon can we teach this language? Because law students out there are clamoring to learn to program. And right now we're teaching them Python, but it feels like Python is not quite the right language to teach lawyers. Something like this would be a little more appropriate. And so, there's a bunch of things you could do with this. We can talk about it more in the sort of the chat discussion. But these are some of the ideas that are enabled when you've got this kind of legalese language. So that's kind of my short presentation. We can go over some of these questions here. Kate wants to know if there's a way to listen in on the Stanford class. I don't know the answer to that, but I can put you on to Michael Genezareth and Roland Vogel. They teach there. Alan Karp has a question. Can there be cycles in the graph? And the answer to that is kind of yes, because if you have an infinitely recurring state sequence in a contract, you could say by default, this contract will renew every 2 years unless one of the parties says that they don't want to. That happens all the time in commerce, and that's kind of a cycle in the graph, so that's fine.
Fantastic! Wow, thank you for this really brief brief overview. I'm sure you could go into hours of depth into those points. I will quickly stop sharing your screen if you don't mind. And I would recommend, in the interest of time, I think we'll move over to Federico, but I would really welcome if you could answer more questions in the chat. And I just want to say, if you haven't done so, please check out Legalese's website. Alexis built it, who I was in contact with from the Legalese team, and it's fantastic. It has incredible accelerando quotes on how you can strap yourself into contracts with your future self. It's really worth checking out, and you can really quickly create legal templates for your NDAs and so forth on the website. Super fast. So I just an encouragement. It's a really lovely website. Okay, next one up we have Cleros, and Cleros I remember was really really recommended by Mark super strongly multiple ones of our discussion, and then I checked it out, and then it became obvious why, and I think it's super fantastic. Like Cleros actually also would welcome you guys to check out their website. Has a lot of already ongoing global disputes that they're resolving, and it's a fantastic global decentralized arbitration platform. And I'm super happy to have Federico here to present more on it. So Federico, welcome, and thanks for making time.
Thank you all. I'm very happy to be here. And well, the talks before mine were perfect as an introduction, because the point of arbitration was brought up many times and there was not a clear solution. And let me give you a solution for this. Let me see. So we have people now like building this new Web3 ecosystem where more and more value is going to be transacted in decentralized platforms, for e-commerce, for finance, for whatever, right? And there is one important problem in this construction, which is, that contracts are incomplete. They are sometimes open to interpretation, ambiguity, and there is a requirement for humans sometimes to decide what happens when there is a dispute. And the thing with smart contracts is that they are smart enough to self-execute, but not smart enough to resolve situations where subjectivity is involved, right? So, for example, this woman, she makes an agreement with a website developer, let's say, for building a website, and the guy delivers a product, and she's not happy, right, with the product, and there's a dispute. Well, they could, to avoid this type of situations, she could, let's say that she makes an agreement through a smart contract with him, and she sends the funds for the payment of his work with a smart contract, which holds the funds as escrow. And then if they both agree that if there's a dispute, there's going to be an arbitrator, it's Cleros. And so if everything goes right and the guy makes a good job, she's happy, she releases the funds. But if she's not happy with his work, so she can press a button and send this to arbitration. So now this goes to Cleros. Cleros is a DAO, which is going to select a number of jurors, a number of decision makers who are going to analyze the evidence, are going to analyze the agreement that was done between the parties. They're going to see what was delivered by the contractor. And so these guys independently, each of them will make a decision, will vote, like refund Alice or pay Bob. In this case, let's say that they decide to refund Alice, so the money which was in the smart contract as escrow is sent back to her, and this brings a solution to this. And they are, the jurors are going to be rewarded because of the time they use for resolution, right? So a question that you might be having is, okay, how do you pick these guys, right? Who are these jurors and how do you select them? Let's say this woman, she's a website designer and she works at a company designing websites. At night, to make some money on the side, she wants to be an arbitrator in Cleros. So in order to be an arbitrator in Cleros, you don't need to, tell who you are, nor show what your skills are. You don't have to prove to anyone that you have the right skills to resolve disputes. But you have to buy this token called, the name is Pinakion, and the ticker is PNK, it's a token in Ethereum. The name comes from the ID that the ancient Athenians had for selecting jurors for the popular trials. So this token is like lottery ticket that gives you the right to be drawn as a juror in one of Kleros courts. Kleros is a system which has lots of different courts. Some can be used for insurance, for translations, or whatever. In this case, let's say that she deposits the token into the court for website development disputes. So a number of other people will also deposit their own tokens to be drawn as jurors. And Kleros is going to select, let's say, 5 people drawing the tokens from this pool, right? And these guys are going to have the right to consider the evidence and vote on the dispute. So, which brings another question. So these guys are anonymous and they don't have to prove that they know anything about the problem. So how do you avoid civil attacks, and how do you make sure that these are not like just lazy people who they don't even look at the evidence and vote randomly? So this is where there's a big innovation of Cleros, is that people have like skin in the game. They have the token they have to deposit stays locked until the session of the court ends, and so this is going to be a stake that they can lose if they don't vote in the appropriate way. So Cleros incentive system is based on loosely in the work of Thomas Schelling. As you know, what Schelling points, I don't need to explain very much this here, but he developed this concept of focal points because of how people coordinate when they have to make decisions and they have to coordinate with others, and they can't communicate with others, or they don't really trust that the other is going to tell the truth. Also, these situations. So focal points are how people tend to coordinate. So Schelling found that New Yorkers used to meet at the Grand Central Station, clock at noon if they had to meet somewhere in the city and didn't know, they couldn't communicate, and they just naturally decided to meet there. It was the Schelling point, or the focal point there, and for them. And in this case, if each of you have to pick a number and you are rewarded if you pick the same as the majority, and penalized if you don't pick the same as the majority, well, each of these 12 numbers would be in principle valid as coordination point, but people will empirically tend to gravitate towards the 1000 because it's just more different than the others, right? So now let's put a number of jurors who are going to consider the same evidence, the same contract, the same product, and they're going to vote, each of them independently, and with the incentive of trying to vote like the majority, and they don't know how others are going to vote. The hypothesis we had at Cleros is that the decision they are going to make is, well, the Schelling point is going to be the truth about the dispute. The truth understood in a consensual way, what this community of jurors, of people who are staked into the court of websites, consider as the correct decision in this type of situation, given the rules that this community has for working and for making, well, the websites and all that, right? So that's the sharing point. And when they make the vote, like if I vote like different from the majority, the money, the token I had staked, I lose it, and this gets distributed evenly into all those that voted in the majority. And I don't get an arbitration fee. The rest who voted in majority, they get an arbitration fee, and they get my token, and they get the fee for arbitration typically comes from the losing party. In this case, was Bob. And so this mechanism design, the goal is having a number of incentives where people who behave dishonestly, like by taking bribes or just voting randomly, they will tend to over time lose money on average. They can, like voting randomly, of course, be on the right side of the majority in some case, but on average, they're going to lose more money than what they make, and they are going to exit the system. And honest users who like really stake their tokens into courts where they have knowledge about, and they're going to analyze the evidence carefully and try to think how the community would think about this. They're going to be more right than wrong, even if they can be on the wrong side of the majority sometimes, but on average, they're going to make more money than what they lose, and they're going to stay arbitrating cases. So where Cleros is used now? So there's a number of use cases. The main, most important case that Cleros had is connected to prediction market. Well, you might remember the Biden and Trump, election, and so there was a wager on who would win that election, and some people thought, well, bet that Trump would win, others bet that Biden would win. And the thing is that there was not a lot of clarity. The day of the election, I think it was in November, and the day the Electoral Congress would meet to certify the results was in January, and this had to be resolved in December, because the terms of the bet said it was to be resolved in December. I don't know what date. That was a really complicated thing. There was $2.5 million staked into this situation, and there was a dispute because some people, Trump side said that, okay, this is an invalid market because there is no decision made by the Electoral College, so there's nobody won yet until January. The other party said, Biden obviously won the election, and all the presentations that Trump made to the federal courts and the Supreme Court, they were rejected. So it's like the spirit of the wager. So according to the spirit of the wager, so it seemed that Biden should win. The Cleros court ruled for Biden, and there were like lots of attempts of attacking the court, by Trump supporters who wanted to turn the situation to their side, and Cleros was very resistant to all these attacks. Another very important use case for Cleros is using the jurors in order to verify if some token, if some asset complies or not with a number of conditions to be listed into a decentralized exchange like Uniswap. Uniswap now uses Cleros in order to make some list of tokens that are not scammy or they comply with a number of conditions that they want, and they pull tokens that were previously vetted by Cleros jurors. And we just launched last month another app which uses this vetting property of Cleros and of jurors in order to verify like if users that make a submission into a list of humans are humans or not, because they might be deep fakes, and if they are not duplicates, right? So in order to have a civil resistant list that Cleros can provide, that jurors can verify these submissions. It works really well. We didn't have any duplicate or deepfake up to now. There were some attempts, and we had more than 5,000 submissions in the month and a half since it started. So the vision is all of this Web3 economy, where you will have lots of different e-commerce services, social media, whatever the different platforms where more value is going to be transacted. So they can just plug into Cleros, and if they have a dispute, they just send it to Cleros, and Cleros send back a decision made based on the rules that the platforms want to use, and we call this like justice as a service, if you want. So, and this Cleros can provide this service for all of the decentralized ecosystem. So thank you very much, and if you have any questions, happy to answer.
Lots of questions. Thank you so much. First of all, very quick before I put it to Robin, we're going to speak about prediction markets, I think, in 2 weeks with Chris Hibbert and a few others who are here on the call. And interestingly enough, the same happened on an Augur prediction market, also about the Biden-Trump election. And Vitalik, I think, won $50,000 by betting for Biden. But it also took a long time to resolve. Anyway, we get into that at prediction markets. I don't want to take any further time away from Robin. Oh, one check. Federico, can you stay longer or not? In case you don't.
Yeah, I can stay.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Good. Whoever has to drops off, and whoever stays on, I'll do more questions. So Robin, while we still have you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So as you probably know, say in the old U.S. South, if you were on a jury, you might need to, vote the way the other jurors would want you to, or you might be punished outside socially. So obviously, these things are all dependent on some basic, structure of society to encourage basic rules. But if in the old South, or even in the old North, you had to buy into the jury, there was an auction that you bought into the slot on the jury, and then only the people who had bought into the slot on the jury played this game. You can imagine the game would be a lot worse, right? So that's the main thing I worry about here. If you were making everybody in the world, have one of these tokens and then you randomly picked one, that's different than having the select group of people who choose to invest in these tokens because they think they can win the token game. Those people will probably coordinate much more strongly to pick some arbitrary rule by which, a majority of them win and make the others lose and take money. So this is a standard, I'm an economics professor. This is a standard, game theory problem. I worry a lot more, again, if people, bid and buy into the game, can I win the jury game? Have I invested in that? They're going to less be sort of relying on overall social standards and overall sort of cultural expectations, and they're going to be a special group of people trying to win the game.
Mm-hmm. I just presented a very short and simplified version of this. So it's a bit more complex in the situation, in the sense of that, first, jurors who participate in courts, they have to follow a number of rules that others also follow, and each court has its own law, let's call this, which is decided by the people who, well, it's predetermined because, for example, the tokens, court, verify tokens, there is a number of, very quite strict rules. Like the logo should be like this size and this, etc. There's a number of quite specific rules. And there is an appeal system, that if, for example, if there is some attack or some bias or something like that, so anyone can appeal to the decision, and then there's going to be another jury that's going to be drawn, and this is going to have twice as many people plus one drawn, right? And these are going to vote again, and this is going to overturn the previous decision. And the distribution of tokens from the first round is going to be affected by how the tokens from by the decision of the second round, right? So if I am a juror from the first round, I might want to collude with the other guys from my round. But if there is an appeal because we collude and make a decision and this is considered unfair, so there's going to be an appeal. And now there's going to be another jury where I don't know if I'm going to be drawn, right? And so now I have to think, okay, how would potentially those second round voters going to vote in this situation? Because if I get that wrong, then I will lose my money, right? And thus, that second round can also be appealed, and there's going to be a third round, twice as many jurors plus one. So it becomes larger and larger and harder to attack. And in the end, there's a 500 jury final, Supreme Court that will be not possible to appeal, and that very big court is kind of it's considered like the big enough sample to determine what is the general sense of this community in particular with this in this case. And because it's a big sample already, right? So it's kind of, if you are the first round,
this isn't the sample of the community. This is the sample of the people who decide to play I'm going to win the jury game by investing in jury tokens in order, and those people are going to try harder to collude under some rule, like the lower letter in the alphabet side wins, right? If some majority of people can just coordinate on some rule, any arbitrary rule, then we can gain more jury tokens compared to the others by just making sure we all follow this rule. And there's a strong financial incentive to pick some coordinated rule like that and follow it if it's this game that you only play if you invest in it such that you think you could win. That's different than appealing to the wider sense of the community, because not everybody, most people aren't going to play this game, right? They don't think I can win the jury game. I'm not part of the winning coalition, so I should not play.
Yeah, well, we haven't been able to find that for now. Like in all of the, Cleros has already had like 600 cases, and there were some of them like quite high profile in kind of situations where scam tokens were sent to trial, and then there was this appeal system, and sometimes the first round or second round situations where we saw that as like not the right decision, but after that, the third round ended up being overturning the previous ones, and we haven't been able to find, at least for now, a situation where this happens. And this
just to make an analogy, since I'm into prediction markets, one standard thing people have done in prediction markets for a long time is they set up a market and they never have a judge resolve it. It just resolves with the final market price. And that's kind of what you're doing. Basically, so in a prediction market where you just set up the market and people trade and the final market price is the thing that judges what the assets are worth, then you have this game you can play. If you get enough people to push the price in one direction and hold it there, then you guys win. And a lot of markets, initially, when you have naive people and they trade, actually, it works okay for them to just set the final price because people haven't figured out how to coordinate. But the bigger concern is, but once they figure it out, that won't work so long. Anyway, so I've said enough, but
thank you for the feedback. Yeah,
I think
good work.
I think it will be really interesting when we come back to prediction markets in 2 weeks from now, and then we should definitely open that again. And I know that Federico on Cleros, you also have an Oracle pod, so I think it will be really interesting if we open up that box of Pandora again there. So I'm hoping that you join that one. And we have great. Next one up, we have Kate Sills, who's still on the line. Thanks for staying.
How are you?
Hi. Well, thanks so much for that, Federico. I'm a huge fan of Kleros. My question has to do with runaway effects. So Kleros relies heavily on feedback in the system, right? So if you make your decision in line with everyone else, then you are rewarded with more tokens, which gives you a greater chance of being selected in the future as a juror, right? I could see this leading to consequences of, for instance, if the US Supreme Court had a mechanism like this, a minority legal opinion would possibly become the majority, and there would be huge runaway effects with that, right? Does Cleros have any mechanism for kind of resetting the system?
Okay, so the first for the runaway effect, let's say there is I don't know, 5 jury situation, and I am a juror, and then I think that I think that like this. Okay, I think the right decision here is like A, but I think that the other 4 guys are just going to vote B because this is the most popular or the most whatever, right? So I think that I'm going to be like but I should be better off if I don't vote what I think is a real decision in this situation. So I still have an incentive in Cleros to vote for what I think is a real decision, because if there is an appeal, right? Let's say I lose my round, there's an appeal, and there's going to be 11 jurors then, right? And now, if the 11 jurors, they overturn the previous round where I participated and lost, then I get the tokens of all of the rest of the jurors that voted the other option, right? If I agree with the final decision of the next round, right? So that is what we call in Cleros, the lone voice of reason, and it tends to compensate those who vote for what they think is right if they end up being right. So this is it's considered into the incentives. And what was the other question, Kate?
So my question is there any mechanism to cause a system reset? So let's say, to give some background, and I'll try to be really quick about this. So I was actually a Cleros juror, and there was a very divisive decision in which I was on the losing side. Mm-hmm. And so I actually lost my money, and I lost my influence. which, is as expected, right? Especially in something that is actually quite divisive, where there's not a clear sign of, someone being malicious. It's just a difference of opinion. So I could see if that mechanism continues, then perhaps my particular side of that would be, my opinion would no longer be represented in the system. And particular threads of legal theory in the Cleros system would become prominent. And I was just wondering, is there a mechanism to reset that?
That's a good question. So first, we see how precedents and previous cases start to shape how people decide in Cleros. Everything in Cleros is made by the community, the rules of each court, the precedents, and you can see this in the proof of humanity, court, where different people, start to argue about the precedent. So assuming there is this, it could be forked, in a different system, like if some situation, it's attacked, right? But how we see this is that first there is a situation where if in case there is a malicious attack, users should have buy lots of tokens in order to try to push the decisions that they want, and in the end they have to control all of the court, let's say to the general court, and buy lots of tokens, and this is going to be very expensive. And then if, let's say, you attack successfully the court, and then the majority can fork it and create another court, and then all your tokens are going to be worthless. There's a lot of game theory mechanisms. And then what we see as people behavior is that eventually if some court in Cleros starts not to provide good decisions to some particular situation, like the website dispute, because it became co-opted by some malicious, or not malicious, but maybe some wrong ideas of how these things should be solved, community can create a different court, and then people who want to resolve website disputes, they can just let's unplug our contract from the malicious court, and then let's plug this other one that seems to serve better our resolution needs, right? So we haven't seen that now because it's still really early stages, but that's how we imagine it would happen.
All right, lovely. Well, again, I think it iterates what we started with, lots of, I think, play testing to do, and lots of red teaming, I think, as we move along in the crypto commons world. So I think we'll learn a lot, and even in the next few months probably about this. Okay, lovely, thank you. And we have one final question, which is from Alan.
Yeah, I'm worried about people choosing conventional solutions rather than the best one, because it's more likely to be picked. Would the jury have selected liquid soap as the next product? Something like that.
Good. Well, so if there is a bias in the general population, I guess Cleros is not going to. It's just going to happen. I don't imagine any other way to solve this. But in the case, as I mentioned before, the case of the lone voice of reason, then if there is a bias in the sample where you were drawn in the early stages, then if you think that you are right, and then the people just picked the majority, what the most popular solution, then you can still vote for what you think is right, and it will scale, and then it's going to go to a higher court, and then you're going to be rewarded if you pick the right decision, right? But if there is a situation where all the population has some bias, mass bias to some situation, I don't think that Cleros or any other system that I know can really solve this. What I think that Cleros is good at is that since the courts are potentially global, and they can involve people from every country and every culture, so it's maybe that it's not going to have the geographical cultural bias, which is going to be from a particular region, right? I'm from Argentina, and probably I have different ideas.
Yeah, I don't think it's a cultural bias problem. It's the unique thinker problem. somebody sees a solution. If it ever hit the market, it would be a big winner. But Cleros might not hit the market because people just don't see the vision. The voters don't see the vision. So you thought of that website. Maybe this guy had a vision that all of a sudden, you know, people who don't know anything about web design would say, wow, that's terrific. But the jury just would never see it, and no jury would, because they know too much.
Yeah, I guess so. In general, what Cleros aims at is like a bulk of, you know, smaller kind of contracts. It's not going to. I wouldn't use Cleros to discover a Picasso or a Da Vinci for sure. But yes, for settling a number of disputes that are like very high volume and typically with like lower value. I think that's where Cleros will work most of the time well. Also, I don't think that any of these like subjective, you know, oracles, as we sometimes call it, you know, can be perfect. You know, human things are complicated, and there are like interpretations, and this is not a simple problem to solve for any system of any kind, I think. But if Cleros can improve what we have now and can provide solutions for a lot of these disputes or situations that require a solution that doesn't have it now, like that's good enough for me.
Okay, I'm sensitive. I got laid off after working on a project that I thought would have been a big winner for my company. So.
Mark had another comment too, I think.
Yes. So there's looking at other prediction markets, in particular pre-blockchain prediction markets, and thinking about Kate's question of there being different groups, let's say, among the jurors that represent different legal theories. The missing feedback in the Cleros arrangement that I think we can learn from the previous prediction markets is that the market is not just on a proposition, but on who gets to decide what the outcome is. In other words, you could imagine that in creating the proposition, you also state what the criteria is for picking jurors that are going to be assembled, or you select what the population of jurors is for which a random jury is selected from, so that people looking at the proposition can also make a judgment on the degree to which they trust that pool of jurors to arrive at an honest decision.
We have a number of ideas, and this one was suggested by a game theorist called Eyal Winter, or something like this, like vein, where jurors, they vote on one idea and one decision, and then, but they also have to give another, you know, okay, I think that this option is going to be picked by X amount of people. So it gives you like both data points, right? Decision, and then some other data points that will maybe give the system an idea of how people think that this is the most popular decision or not, right? We like the mechanism design at Cleros is very early stage. For now, really has worked very well. Now that we have been working on the proof of humanity, and now we have a list of people that are verified, so we can experiment with the different set of, you know, jurors, because we didn't have identity before, right? And so if you don't have the identity, you know, people could just split tokens to different accounts, and, you know, but now if we require people to be registered first into proof of humanity, then we can change the pools from which jurors are drawn, and this, well, creates a number of new situations that we are exploring. We have a very, you know, small but very intensive, like, you know, research team that tries to see how different social choice theories apply to what we do, and trying to improve the system.
Well, ideally, it would be cool if that could be even a pseudonymous one, where you could, you know, pseudonymously do that and then still gain reputation if you've resolved them positively. Ideally, I don't know how, you know, the proof of humanity part, but I think, Mark, I'm hoping that I don't butcher this, but I think the people that you were referencing was the Nobel laureates Oliver Hart and Ben Holstrom, right, who suggest that often the most important question for a corporation is not how can we design the best plan, but who has the discretionary decision-making power. And I think we quote that in one of the parts of the book, and which is actually when we talk about video contracts. So I was, you know, wondering, and Mark Stiegler had talked about them before in the group, maybe even that would be something that people could submit to the arbitration, and so that then the arbitrators would have more context in the arbitration as they arbitrate. Anyway, those are, I think, all. I mean, this is a really terribly exciting space, I think, that you're in, and yeah, I mean, it's crazy how many. I mean, you said it's over 600, right? That you're already like disputing. This is really insane and super inspiring, I think. And I always go on the website and see which are currently running, and it's really, really cool. Anyway, I think you have a lot of big fans of this year, and I also see that Meng Weng is still on the call, so I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you both for coming, for staying on so long. I was super inspired seeing both of your projects, and thought it had a lot of what Chip really early proposed with Amex, and so it's really cool, I think, to see how from a really early, super ambitious prototype and an idea now got into now different projects have different bits and realize it in the projects that they're creating. So really, really cool. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining. And yeah, we have a meeting tomorrow for those who are interested in joining. This is our monthly cross-silo collaboration, Foresight-wide. So you have a chance to join this group, which will be well, Gab Alpha from Tezos will talk about chain-based governance, and I will lead a session afterwards in which I want to know from you what are kind of like really compelling near-term use cases for crypto commerce tech. So that would be a super open discussion off the record, and we're just gonna try to come up with a few really compelling near-term use cases, and maybe with a focus on privacy. But I want to hear from you in that session. So thank you all so much for joining. Next week we then have a DAO-focused discussion with, I think, 6 really great projects. So yeah, I'm really excited to see you either tomorrow or next Saturday. Down your wine, Federico.
No, it's not wine. It's juice.
I was thinking like,
no.
Okay. Well, we cut this bit out of the recording. Shall we say this? Well, thank you all for joining. Yeah, juice. Yeah. Okay, well, let's all get to our juices and juices to the juices and cheers to the great speakers. Thank you for joining, and I can't wait to see many of you tomorrow or on next Thursday. Thanks, everyone. This was very fun.